Hello and welcome along. So, the Cabal, who are they? What did they do? And what happened? The first thing to say is just, who are the Cabal? Well, they're a secret organization, or at least they were, and they were dedicated essentially to destroying chaos. That's what their central goal was, and they did all sorts of things in an attempt to eliminate chaos. So they had a very deep hatred of chaos. They were one of its primary enemies, along with the Emperor. They worked in secret through many thousands of different alien races, including humanity, to try and to bring chaos to an end. They had members from all sorts of different species, including, as I said, some humans. There were quite a lot of Eldar. There were all sorts of reptilians, insectoids, non-corporeal beings, so energy beings, literally anything you could imagine. There was probably a member of the Cabal that looked like that. They had quite a high number of psychers, and particularly psychers with precognition, so the ability to see into the future. That was a big part of what they did, and they tried to use this to try and predict events so that they could manipulate events to eliminate chaos in the long term. They were very subtle generally in what they did, and obviously extremely secretive. They had access to extremely high levels of technology as well, because they essentially had access to the technologies of all of their members, and this meant that they had a level of technology that was way above that of the Imperium at the time of the Horus Heresy. But they did exist long before then, and they've been trying again to achieve the same goal of eliminating chaos for longer than humanity itself has existed as a species. So extremely long time. And you can imagine over time, members would come and go. The new members would come in as old members were either died or left or whatever. Now, their oldest members probably were potentially Eldar, although there are others that may be, well, there's one particular member who may be described as an old one, but it's probably physically description more fits a Slan. So if you know the Warhammer world rather than 40k world, there's the Slan, which are basically like reptilian toad frog kind of beings, are extremely powerful psychers. Now, there's obviously a lot of crossover between the Warhammer and Warhammer 40k, and it's essentially regarded that the Slan who exist in Warhammer also exist in the 40k universe, and that they are potentially the old ones. And this is a theory that this member of the Cabal, who is one of their most powerful oldest members, is actually an old one. But I think, because if you think about it, in the Warhammer world, the Slan are actually just the servants of the old ones, they're not the actual old ones. So I think it's plausible that in the Warhammer 40k world, it's also that these Slan and whichever ones remained alive to the time of the Heresy were probably just the oldest surviving servants of the old ones, rather than being actual old ones. But that's all up for debate. So as I said, they had very advanced technology, and this included things like cloaking devices that made them invisible to Imperial technology. They could jam sensors. They could contact people across very, very long distances. They could terraform, for want of a better word, a planet, both geologically and atmospherically. So they could make a planet whatever they wanted it to be. They had extremely high levels of genetic engineering, so they could create perpetuals, which are beings that are essentially immortal. They could bring people back from the dead. They could do almost anything you can imagine, essentially. So the level of technology they had compared to the Imperium was almost magic. And that combined with the fact that they were very powerful psychers, or at least many of their members were, and their inner circle had the ability to see the future much more clearly than even elder Farseers or people like the Thousand Sons, Corvidae. How their ability to see the future compared to someone like the Emperor or Magnus is a bit hard to say, because we never really get that information. But I mean, it is made clear that their ability to see the future is very powerful. However, it's not flawless, and perhaps their belief in it being flawless leads to their undoing, essentially. So they call their ability to see into the future the acuity. It's essentially a very powerful form of precognition, so the ability to see the future events. and they consider it to be much more effective than normal precognition that's used by many psychers around the galaxy from different species. And they essentially think that they can see the future so clearly that they have eliminated all possibilities of the future except for two, which leads them to their major influence on the Imperium, which is their intervention in the Horus Heresy. So they believe that there are only two possible futures, and one is essentially Horus leads the heresy. He is victorious, but a small part of him hates himself for it. He then kind of turns on his own allies, and eventually this leads to quite a rapid destruction of all of humanity. And humanity is wiped from the galaxy, and in doing so, the fuel for chaos, essentially, which is the emotions of humanity, is stripped away and chaos dies off. That's their one view of the future. Now, of course, there are other various species in the galaxy that do contribute to chaos existence, but humanity is by far the most influential because of sheer numbers and being quite psychically active in the warp. So this idea is kind of plausible, but their idea is that basically as humanity destroys itself, it just takes the rest of the universe, well, the galaxy really, because the 40k world is kind of limited to events within the galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy. But it takes everyone with them, and chaos are left with no food, and essentially they die. That's their ideal of a future. Not a great future for anybody else, but for them, that's what the best thing to happen. Now, their alternative future is humanity wins. Sort of wins. So the Emperor wins. He defeats Horus, but he is mortally wounded and put onto the Golden Throne, where he is kept alive, but is not fully himself anymore. And humanity slowly degrades over time. Technology stagnates, and there's endless war, and slowly chaos gets more and more of a grip over humanity, and everything spirals out of control until chaos consumes everybody and everything in the galaxy, and chaos wins. Now, that future is quite similar to what the actual 40k universe is. So you can see that that's one of the futures they saw was probably what actually happened. Now, having seen these two futures and decided that that was the only thing to do was to try and make the first one come true, so that Horus must win. They decide to use their agents. They have agents all around the galaxy from all different species in different places. Some of which are just normal beings. Others they've made into perpetuals. That is, they've changed them so that they can't die, essentially. Or if they're very hard to kill, and if they do die, they come back, even from the most terrible injury. It's fair to say at this point that perpetuals can exist naturally, or at least some are believed to be natural, like the Emperor and some others. But probably most of them are created using technology, and the Cabal are one of the organizations that has the technology to do that. The Cabal were organized with an inner circle who controlled most of the events, and they were the most powerful members of the Cabal, and they consisted of quite a small number. And Gehet, who is the potential Slan alien, so a reptilian alien with high psychic abilities, is probably their most oldest member and forms part of an inner circle that kind of control everything. But also there was Slaudar, who was an Eldar Autarch, who is one of the more influential members. So probably after Gehet, probably one of the most powerful, and he is also one of the most militant. So he is generally more militaristic in his solutions that he comes up with for what they should do. He generally wants to kill people, and that's quite aggressive. But there are other members, but they're the two of the key members that are basically named. There are some other ones, but they're generally not that influential. So at some point, the Cabal decide that they have to be more active and intervene in what will be the Horus Heresy. So they determine that there are two Primarchs that are most critical in the outcomes of the heresy. One is Horus, who is they call the oldest Primarch, and the other is Alpharus / Omegan, who they call the youngest Primarch. Now, it's hard to really give the Primarchs ages because they're all grown in vats next to each other. Traditionally, though, it's based on when they were returned to the Emperor. or the legion that their gene seeds would use to create. So you could call the lion the oldest, and in some ways he considered himself that. So it's a possibility that they got the wrong Primarch, and it's not Horus. It should have been the lion. But anyway, that's a bit of a sidetrack. But so Alpheus / Omegan is considered the youngest because he was found last. At least that's how it's portrayed in the various heresy books. So they decide that Horus inevitably will fall to chaos and start the heresy, and that what they have to do is persuade Alpheus / Omegan to help Horus win, so that eventually the first outcome they have foreseen will take place, and that chaos will basically die off after humanity is destroyed. And they seemingly manage to do this. They persuade Alpheus / Omegan to help them. He joins Horus and helps him win the heresy. At least that's what he tries to do. Now, apart from actually initially persuading Alpheus / Omegan to join them, they also have two major influences on events in the heresy. One is they get Alpheus to allow Corax and a small number of Raven Guard to escape the Ispan 5 drop site massacre. As far as Imperial forces are concerned, a combination of skill and luck manages to escape from the planet, but actually it's the Alpha Legion under Alferis's orders letting them get away. And this is so that the Corax will eventually be given this advanced gene tech by the Emperor to go and restart his legion. So the Emperor gives him access to sort of the undifferentiated Primarch gene stock, which he used to create the Primarchs. And with this and some kind of detailed instructions of how to use it, he is able to rapidly create new Space Marines who are superior in many ways to the standard Space Marine. However, the Alpha Legion corrupt these samples, which leads to that venture failing for the Raven Guard. But they also steal the rest of the uncorrupted material, which they weren't supposed to do, and they turn on the Cabal. No one really knows why they did this, and it's not been revealed as far as I know anywhere. This may be retconned at some point, but I believe this is still a mystery, and as is almost everything that the Alpha Legion do. Whether they were never actually persuaded to join the Cabal and they were just doing it for their own devices, to wait and to look for opportunities like this that might benefit them, or they thought that the Cabal were doing the right thing and they were helping them, but then decided that this is just too good an opportunity to turn down and we'll do this as well. Or maybe they changed their minds part of the way through because they started to see things differently. We don't know. Also, we know that the Alpha Legion will kind of split with their own internal divisions, as Alpheus and Omegan seem to have started to disagree on things, and that there were sects within the Legion that seemed to be double crossing and then triple crossing and quadruple crossing, and it goes on and on and on, and it becomes very hard to untangle the knots of what the Alpha Legion's motives really were. Another time they intervened during the heresy is the death of Vulcan. So essentially, Vulcan has been driven insane by Conrad Kurz through constant torture, and now Vulcan is a perpetual, so he can keep coming back, and he keeps coming back after every terrible torture he gets. So he comes back eventually insane. So the Cabal decide that Vulcan is critical in the defeat or victory of the Emperor, and so they decide that Vulcan needs to die. So they send their agents to try and kill him. Now, eventually, those agents change sides and decide that actually that's not a good thing to do, and they cure Vulcan of his insanity, essentially, although he does seem to be dead for a while after that as well. Their plan was for Vulcan to die, and so had Vulcan died, perhaps their actual overall plan of the Emperor being defeated would have come to pass, potentially, but they didn't foresee that happening. They didn't foresee their agents turning on them and Vulcan surviving. So you can see that there are flaws in their ability to see the future, no matter how good they think they really are. Now, ultimately, they are defeated. Eldrad Ulthran of the Eldar, he starts interfering with his own agents to defeat the Cabal. He decides that they are actually is more of a threat to the galaxy than Chaos, and that their attempts to destroy Chaos are actually going to lead to more problems. He doesn't believe that their ability to see the future is actually real. Well, he knows they can see the future. He doesn't believe that their conclusions that they draw are accurate. and he decides to fight against them. So he starts to intervene. This leads to changing of some of the agents' loyalties, and eventually it leads to him sort of running a campaign to eliminate the leading members of the Cabal, and he has them systematically killed off. This is successful, and eventually they seem to just die out and disappear. It's fair to say that he was kind of right, that they predicted these two futures, and their attempt to get the first future actually seems to result in the second future. So although they may have been right in the two futures they saw, we just don't know, what their activity did lead to the eventual terrible situation that the Imperium finds itself in, where it's basically done nothing for 10,000 years, and it's turned itself into an even worse organization than it was during the Heresy or pre-Heresy. Whether there were, in fact, the actual real issue is that they didn't see the future correctly, and there was an alternative third or more options that could happen. We don't really know, but Eldrad thinks that he does know. He thinks there's a third option where in the far future humanity and the Elder will unite together, and that's what he's trying to achieve, and that would be the end of Chaos. They could destroy Chaos together, which is a nice uplifting story for the 40k universe. But as it is the 40k universe, let's be honest, that's probably not true. Were the Cabal right to try and intervene? Did they see the future wrong? Was Eldrad right? Did he in fact see the correct future? Or are they all wrong? What is the actual future of the 40k universe? Who knows? Probably more and more retcons. That's probably it. Yeah, like, subscribe, share, comment. That's it. And I'll see you next time.